Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation, my brothers and sisters. This is where right and left come to be reasonable. Help me. Help me. Help me understand why I should be impressed by this latest set of revelations about Russiagate. Okay? I want you to really engage with me tonight on this. Okay? Do I think that the dossier should not have been relied on? Yes. Do I wish I hadn't bought into the sell at that time? Yes. Were there a lot of people telling me not to believe it in the media and on the podcast then that I ignored? No. Okay? Just like with the vaccine, just like back in 9/11, just like with weapons of mass destruction, it's really easy to be right after the facts come out. Okay? And I feel this is another one. And yes, I do feel that this is a great way to get the same group of people who care about this also care about Epstein, and now they're distracted. And I have to say, the tactics to me seem like devices that would make Orwell blush. The smoking gun, classified annex. I mean, first clue. Does anybody put anything important in an annex? Special Counsel John Durham, 2023 report was on this topic. The FBI and scrutinizing their processes and their bases for the Trump-Russia investigation. It is no small irony that it seems to me that someone's trying to distract us from Epstein with this, and the irony is that they're doing the exact same thing with this that they did with Epstein. Overpromising, underdelivering. Grossly exaggerating the surrounding circumstances of these files and saying they now have the goods to prove Hillary got the FBI to investigate Trump in 2016. And again, I'm going to keep saying this. If that's the truth, why did Durham ignore it in his report? If you're going to call something proof of treason as a federal official to accuse somebody of that, let's go again with this statement. Keep asking yourself, why would Durham have excluded what they're saying is so powerful? Okay? These new documents, they say, prove Clinton personally manufactured the Russian collusion narrative against Trump to get the FBI to start investigating him during the campaign. Now, Durham was appointed to look at exactly this by Trump under his apparent political agent, Attorney General Barr, in 2019. He spent 4 years investigating this. No, Biden did not disrupt it, did not compromise him, did not change it. None of that is true. The report is 300 pages, okay? Remember, a special counsel, as my producer points out, they're not supposed to be novelists, okay, or giving after-action reports, all right? And if you look at Durham's report, he obviously went to great lengths to find things the FBI did wrong, okay? And this was an in-depth critique of the Russia probe, and a lot of it is stylistic. He didn't recommend any charges. He didn't recommend anybody in the intelligence community for any kind of significant prosecution as a significant player. And there were cases that he brought that were weak sauce, and he lost 2 out of 3. He charged 3 people. The 2 cases he brought to trial, he alleged 2 witnesses lied to the FBI. He lost both cases. And the third person, an ex-FBI lawyer, pleaded guilty that he altered an email that was used for a surveillance warrant under FISA. And again, I'm not arguing perfection. I am not arguing in favor of the administration. I'm not even arguing in favor of this investigation. I didn't think then that I have to cover it, right? This is what they're doing. I have to cover it. But I didn't think then. I kept explaining to you guys what collusion meant, right? Because collusion's not a crime, except in securities law. Collusion is a behavior. And did they take meetings they shouldn't have? Yeah. And did Trump say things that were incendiary and suggested things? Yeah. But that's a media story to me, not a federal investigation. Okay? And the guy who pleaded guilty got probation. So it's not like Durham struck gold here. Okay? And he did seem desperate to accommodate his mandate. And yet, he just ignored and buried in an annex a silver bullet proving Clinton worked with the FBI to frame Trump. It's nowhere in his main report, but that's how big it is. You really buy that? It's not an insult to your intelligence that they're just assuming you're not going to read the 29 pages they put out. They're hanging their hat on 2 emails. Now, there's a problem with the emails. I don't know that they're real. From a Soros think tank guy, and I know you hear Soros, all of a sudden you believe it, right? Soros think tank guy that Russian intelligence hacked in 2016. Russian intelligence. Then Dutch intelligence hacked it back from Russia and gave it to us. It's complicated, I know. But the unverified emails, okay, because this isn't our stuff. We're getting it by way of Russia, by way of the other guys. Hillary Clinton approved her staffer Julia's idea about Trump and Russian hackers hampering U.S. elections. That should distract people from her own missing email, especially if the affair goes to the Olympic level. I don't even know what that means. It's very stilted English, which makes sense because it's been twice translated in different languages. Another email reads, the Clinton staffer says it will be a long-term affair to demonize Putin and Trump. Later, the FBI will put more oil into the fire. Okay? They're saying this is it. This is the smoking gun. Clinton got the FBI to do her dirty bidding. Sounds great. Makes sense. Deep statey, Clinton as establishment, Trump as the outsider, everybody's against him, he's the victim. It really lines up well. But one, we don't even know if the emails are real. Okay? And no, I'm not just saying that out of convenience. I don't care if Clinton or anyone else goes down for doing something wrong to you. I have no problem. I will be all over it. I promise you. If anything, I do too much of that. We're too hyper-aggressive. To be honest, right? But I don't know. The think tank guy himself says he never wrote the emails. Now, before you say, oh, yeah, what's he going to say? Trump says he never wrote that card to Epstein. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, but you're not going to give this guy it, right? And he says, I would have never used the term put more oil into the fire. Okay. Now, when you translate the phrase add fuel to the fire in Russian, you get a phrase that better translates to add oil on the fire. Because these emails, again, I told you this, were translated and rewritten from English to Russian and back from Russian to English. Literally, it's a game of telephone, right, for sourcing. A Clinton official named Julia, I don't know who it is, but let's go with it, talks to a think tank guy. The think tank guy writes an email about what she said. Russia steals the think tank guy's emails. Russian intelligence translates those emails from English to Russian. Russian intelligence writes a report about the emails. Dutch intelligence steals the documents back from Russia. They give them to the CIA or FBI, and they translate it back from Russian to English. Now, look, that's all possible, okay? In fact, it's probable. It's more than possible. But it also could be false. And not only is the province and hearsay so apparent in this chain of custody, but more importantly, we could be being played by Russia, okay? They're unverified. There'd never be enough for me to report, okay? If I brought these to Michael Korn, he'd be like, how do we know they're real? I wouldn't be able to answer it. I'd try to get to the people. The guy would tell me I didn't write them, and I'd kind of be at a dead end, unless I was like the New York Post. But it didn't stop Durham from writing this bombshell claim in 2023. In late July 2016, U.S. intelligence agencies obtained insight into Russian intelligence analysis alleging that Clinton approved a campaign plan to stir up a scandal against U.S. presidential candidate Trump by tying him to Putin and the Russians' hacking of the Democratic National Committee. He says the intelligence community couldn't verify if the claim was legit. That is the answer to my question. He didn't include it in a big way in the main report because he didn't know if it was true. In the new annex, you see his office also didn't believe it. Page 22 of the 29-page Durham annex. They write, quote, in short, neither the office, meaning Durham's office, nor someone redacted, have been able to determine definitively whether the purported Clinton campaign blank plan blank, again, redacted, was entirely genuine, partially true, a composite pulled from multiple sources, exaggerated in certain respects, or fabricated in its entirety. Now, let me tell you why you shouldn't gloss that over. Do you know what that is the exact explanation of? The dossier. That is exactly how the dossier should have been interpreted. And we would have never had this whole witch hunt of Russiagate to begin with. So now, Durham says exactly that about this information, basically saying, I don't know that it's real. So he ignores it in his main report, but now you want to believe it's a silver bullet. On the same specious basis that you say we shouldn't believe the dossier. Trump was on much better footing with the narratives about the intelligence community and the deep state working to harm him, that they had different opinions about what Russia's motives were and picked the ones that were worst for him. That's better because it's just a matter of opinion and it's going to be hard to disprove, right? Because there's no investigation into that like there is with Durham. There is nobody who looked at the same thing that Trump is talking about and didn't see what he wants you to see. So to get more perspective on whether Russiagate is a big deal or just a big distraction, let's bring in two better minds. Former independent counsel from the Bill Clinton investigations, Bob Ray, and a journalist who's been investigating Russiagate from the very beginning, certainly a better mind than mine, Mr. Michael Isikoff. It's good to see you both. Thank you for joining me. With the one caveat, Michael, you're not as bad at this. But Bob, you can talk over people's heads real easy. You're so smart. You know, you're so experienced in these things. So let's remember, you're talking to the big nose in the middle here, okay? So, Bob, you heard my questions, my concerns, right? Basically distilled to one sentence. If this was such a big deal, how come Durham dismissed it and didn't make it a big part of his own report on exactly this topic? What's your take?
Well, I think you're right, because he couldn't prosecute it. And I think, all of us need to get out of the habit of thinking that every, real major problem in this country is somehow solved by bringing a prosecution. It's more important that this information come to light than whether or not you're going to be able to prove anything out of it. Now, look, I don't think there's a provable case of treason here. That's not really the issue. I think that the statute of limitations has long passed. I think the best that you can say for this is whether or not there was any misleading or actual demonstrably false testimony before the Congress, either under oath or just to members of Congress not under oath, that may be subject to prosecution, at least theoretically. But that's all beside the point, really. Your main point is it important for us to know this? And I would suggest to you that the answer is yes. It's important to get to the bottom of this. Because just like you suggest, you can cherry pick intelligence and you can choose sides and you can line things up, which is what the intelligence community does all the time. For good and sufficient reason, they make educated guesses about where they think things line up. The dangerous part is when you cherry pick intelligence and you mix that with opening up a criminal investigation, which can do long-term damage to the people who are on the other end of it. In this instance, namely the first Trump administration, and also it does great damage to the country in the process. And
I agree. I don't think we needed. I don't think we needed what they went through. I think I got a little sandbagged by the dossier, and I was very disappointed by Mueller's testimony. I realized he's not who he used to be at that time, and I wasn't blown away by the report, and I didn't like that all the juiciest stuff was left for also near the end of the report about what they would have done if they had a different mandate. But Michael, even given Bob's right discernment that just because it's not a federal case doesn't mean it's not information that's good to know. I'm saying Durham left it out for a reason. Yes, he couldn't prosecute it, but there are a lot of things he said in the report that weren't prosecutable, and the cases he brought were a pretty penny ante, to be honest, and he still lost 2 of them. So
look,
when you look
showed
at this,
the reason
what's the connection?
You showed the reason why it was left out of the main report. At the end of the day, Durham concluded that these emails were not credible, that they may well have been fabricated. And he showed evidence that it was stitched together from different emails sent by different people. So that pretty much, ends the discussion right there. If you don't have credibility behind this Russian intelligence that supposedly showed this Clinton grand plan, you can't put it in the main report. You certainly can't prosecute on the basis of it. And, one could question whether it either even should have been in the annex in the first place if, at the end of the day, Durham couldn't stand behind the credibility of the intelligence he's analyzing. I mean, I'm just, look, we've had a number of releases over the last few weeks. Some of them, I believe, have shown some interesting material, mostly on the margins, but, worth knowing. This one is a true nothing burger. And I got to just ask, Robert Ray was a independent counsel himself.
He was the man. Yeah.
Right. We had an independent counsel investigating all these matters for, as you pointed out, 4 years. The idea that here we are some years later talking about, oh, do we need a new special counsel or do we need a new investigation? These are matters that appear to have been thoroughly investigated, and it's really hard to see why there's any basis for continuing to beat this horse.
And look, to
Chris,
be honest,
I will say,
to be plain, Bob, I want you to make your point, but I want the audience to understand. I'm not accusing, because I know how the audience responds to things a little bit better maybe than you guys do, because I do this every night. I'm not saying Bob Ray is the one doing any of these things. I'm asking him to assess it for me as someone I trust who's done the job before, okay? And what I'm saying is, Bob, I just feel like they're doing exactly now with this that they point out was wrong to do with the dossier, which is taking information that you don't really know if it's true and hanging an investigation on it. They were right about how the dossier was abused, but now they seem to want to abuse this to do the same thing that was done to them.
Yeah, but you know what? The one thing that's disheartening about it is the recognition about how easy it is to open up an FBI investigation and what the damage that can be done as the result of that. And the fact is, it doesn't alter this very basic fact. In January of 2017, the Obama administration left this hand grenade on the table, which saddled almost the entirety of the first Trump administration with an investigation that we now know, in all likelihood, really should never have been conducted. And somebody at some point along the way, much earlier than it was done so, should have shut this down, or at least looked into it enough to get the kinds of answers that we're now, to the questions that we're now asking all these years later. And the fact that that happened is disheartening. Whether anybody can be held accountable or not for that, time will tell, history will judge. But I will say, the bigger issue to me is how disheartening it is to have the FBI involved in the intelligence operation and using and cherry picking intelligence in order to open up a criminal investigation that did a fair amount of damage, not only to a new administration, but to the country as well. That we ought to learn a lesson from. And I hope that's what comes out of this.
Michael, give me a quick button on that assessment.
It's worth remembering that, John Durham spent 4 years investigating the very matter that Bob was just talking about here, about whether this was a legitimate investigation or not. And what did he conclude? Well, ultimately what he said was, yeah, maybe it shouldn't have been a full-fledged investigation. It should have been a preliminary investigation by the FBI. So even he was acknowledging there was disturbing evidence and disturbing information about Russian hacking of the 2016 election, hacking of the DNC emails, hacking of the Clinton Podesta emails, and there were a number of Trump campaign officials who did have what appeared to be disturbing contacts that needed to be investigated. They were investigated. In some cases, Mueller got criminal convictions, in others he didn't. But the fact is that we're really not talking about very much if the issue is, was there wrongdoing? A preliminary versus a full-fledged, make of it what you will.
I will say this.
Not much.
And I'm not accusing either of you of this, because I asked you on the show tonight. But I am guilty of, I'm not talking Epstein right now, am I? I'm not asking for the release of things that were promised by people that are at the head of the FBI right now when they were just regular pod bros, am I? I'm not talking about any of that. And that means this is effective on its face. And if we don't think it has anything to do with that, we're being too naive. Robert Ray, appreciate you, brother. Thank you. Michael Isikoff, as always. Thank you. 4 minutes and 35 seconds. So, another one, controversy, controversy. Look, for me, Russiagate should have never gone the way it did in the beginning, but it did. And now, doing a new round of inappropriate, unnecessary lawfare is also not necessary. Controversy. Sydney Sweeney, controversy or controversy? For me, controversy. Because people are saying that this is a seminal moment that shows that woke is dead. I don't know. So I wanted to bring in some better minds to discuss why this has become a big deal. I'll tell you this much. It ain't about a pair of pants.
Sydney Sweeney has very Keynes.
Damn, that's hot. Now, here's how old I am. Whoa, those guys up there for. This is Sydney Sweeney. This is the Gene commercial that's so controversial. And you want to know how old I am? I'm talking about the car. It's a Mustang GT350. Man, they got that 289 to whine so high. Nothing sounds like that. Amazing. And if that's her, if she actually did that, that's not AI. That is nice, dropping the clutch and spinning it out like that. Very cool. Now, what is this really about? It's not about me being an old guy and a muscle car enthusiast. It's about actually the opposite. It's about things that aren't authentic, that aren't really American, and that aren't really worthy, okay? People say that this was a play on white supremacy. That when they said genes, G-E-N-E-S, meaning, God, you know, her parents put together a pretty kid here, which they did, that's somehow racist. Now, the other side is saying that this was such a dud, this criticism, that the company made so much money, that so many people are so disgusted that people are offended by this, that it's the end of wokeism. American Eagle, that's whose genes they are. You're not only making genes hot again, but you're ushering in the end of wokeness and the return of normalcy, whatever that means. The end of woke advertising has arrived. The fact that neither American Eagle nor Sydney Sweeney has apologized, pulled the ads, or said they would institute sensitivity training shows that woke is dead. Even the VP couldn't resist getting after this. Anything to distract from Epstein.
My political advice to the Democrats is continue to tell everybody who thinks Sydney Sweeney is attractive is a Nazi. that appears to be their actual strategy. And it's like, you guys, did you learn nothing from the November 2024 election?
Now, I will say this in terms of selective outrage. Do you remember this one? Show the other picture. When Beyonce did the jeans ad with the blonde hair out of nowhere. Now, why didn't people go crazy that this was cultural appropriation, or that she was trying to look white, or that they paled out her skin and she blonded her hair and they're trying to make her white? Nobody said anything then. And by the way, I'm fine with that. I think it's another beautiful woman demonstrating a product that'll make other people want it, just like with this. So what am I missing? Two women I lean on for better understanding than I have on my own. Former Ohio State Senator Ms. Nina Turner and conservative commentator and journalist Ms. Scottie Nell Hughes. It is good to have you both. Nina, what am I missing?
Well, obviously, Chris, woke is not dead. We're here talking about it on TV tonight, so it's not dead at all. I mean, I think there are three ways to look at wokeness. One is the original way, which is how the African-American community described it in terms of having your head on a swivel, being conscious of your surroundings because of bigotry and actually death for African-Americans. There is how liberals co-opted wokeness and put everybody in the pot. And then there's how conservatives or right-wingers weaponize the term wokeism. And for Vice President J.D. Vance, I mean, I certainly have not seen any Democrat that calls themselves a leader calling Sweeney a Nazi. Nobody should be calling her a Nazi. She did a commercial. They probably wrote the script for her. And that should be that. Now, the social scientist in me has a lot to say about this, but just in terms of the commercial itself and how either side is trying to use it and weaponize it, I don't get it.
So, Scottie, do you think this is something where it's just the organic reaction is that anybody who's upset by this is the problem? Or do you believe that this is being used to advantage by the right side of the imaginary aisle?
Well, let me just point out, Chris, let me illustrate just how upside down our culture is right now. I find myself a conservative defending an ad campaign featuring this hyper glamorous, over sexualized young woman who is being marketed to teenagers and wearing something that I would never allow my daughter to actually go out of the house in. And yet, I'm going to go on here and I'm going to defend her, all in this name of supporting real biological women. What we have seen is that there's been this pendulum and this push by the progressive left that has pushed pop culture so far off the rails that defending basic reality to conservatives now feels like this is an act of rebellion being kind of covered and allowed because we have Donald Trump in the White House.
Well, you're lucky, as we both know, that the girls these days can't wear jeans that are baggy enough. It's everything else that is disappearing on their bodies. But as what my daughters want to wear goes, well, one of them's too old. She tell me to, take a walk. But the 15-year-old, I'm okay with this. With the big pants fad, I'm good with. But Nina, there is something here. First of all, I agree with the first 2 points you made. Wokeism was defined for African Americans by African Americans, and it had a very practical impact that was real. It was literal and figurative. I'm with you.
That's right.
2, it was co-opted, which always sucks, and because nothing is ever co-opted and made better. So I'm with you. But then there is the third, which is the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue becoming, pictures of women who look very different than who had ever been on there before, and trying to make things that, have always been normal, now abnormal and judging, especially when it comes to beauty, and that this was a line too far.
I mean, Chris, I would like for us to be able to talk about this from an academic sense. So the social scientist in me is cringing. Because there's a difference between people trying to weaponize this as a political weapon or being in the classroom and talking about the history of standards of beauty in the United States of America, which, by the way, if we really peel back the layers, not many women could meet, not even some white women. But however, the standards of beauty about slimmer nose, blue eyes, blonde hair, anybody who would deny that in this country's history, that has been the major category by which people's beauty are defined. So now if you can't meet that standard of beauty, especially if you are of another ethnicity or race, which race is a social construct, but I'm going to use the term, then
no such thing.
By default, you're not beautiful. So I'm just saying, Chris and Scottie, that there is an academic side to this that I really don't believe that most people, whether they're arguing that wokeness is dead or trying to weaponize this maybe on the left, really care to understand.
Scottie, give me the last
I just have to point out, this is just one model. And you cannot look at whether it be the Miss USA system, the Miss America system. There has been a very wide diversity of women that have stood up there and represented all forms of beauty that exist in the melting pot of America today. So I'm not just going to let you say that America is defined. We're not Switzerland. We're not we're not, the just blonde haired and blue eyed. I think beauty in America today has been defined completely, and it's not just of one sort of category or other. So even the social scientists, I think that's just an excuse.
Scottie, you're missing the point. There was a point of time in this country's history where you were hard pressed to see black women or darker skinned women in ads on TV.
It's true.
We
all know that's
today.
True.
We're talking about
Scottie's saying we've made
some things today too.
No, but it's not. It's very diverse on TV. That's part of the problem.
Hey, Scottie, listen, I studied this stuff, so I'm not just telling you this. I understand this stuff on a deeper level than people having just a visceral reaction to it. You and I should have a discussion maybe off air, and I can talk to you about it.
No, listen, look, it's not an academic topic, though, on one level, though, right? Because it's about cultural impression. And, of course, that always becomes part of the compendium of an understanding of a psychological construct behind a culture. But taken at its own surface level, you're going to have the impression that you have. Now, that may be, as Gladwell taught us all, the sum total of all of these different infatuations you've been programmed to have. And then you just blink and you think these things. But that said, are we where we were in terms of limited notions of beauty? No, I agree with Scottie. Do we have a long way to go in terms of creating acceptance of something other than perfection? Yeah, we do, as a girl dad with two gorgeous young women who constantly have to think about if they're enough. But I got
Chris,
bigger
you
problems
and
in these
Scottie have
genes.
the luxury of saying that you're not African American. I mean, yes, have we come?
I know, Nina, but I think that is.
No,
I think
no.
Have we?
I think that.
The
This is
totality
the
all I'm saying is
1950s,
this.
Nina. Wake up, it's 2025, and you have
Scottie,
to
you
respect
don't have to
the
tell-
groundwork that your mothers and my mother
All right,
did.
hold on. I can't hear
Are you gonna
anything.
try
I
to
can't
tell
hear
me
anything.
what
Can't hear
type of
anything.
progress has been made.
Hold on.
Scottie, on
I
issues
can't.
like this?
I can't hear anything. Scottie, let me have Nina make her point. I'm just saying, Nina, I'm not saying that I understand this from the black perspective or the black female perspective. I'm just giving, that doesn't mean I can't have an assessment of the state of our culture. That's all I'm
Absolutely.
saying.
No, you can definitely have an assessment. All I'm saying is that, yes, has some progress been made? Yeah, but relative to what? And that's what I'm saying. For people to who
I agree
really
with
truly want to understand this and not think that everybody is trying to weaponize this, it is an understanding of the historic norms and how they impact us all, how we're all socialized to think and to feel a certain way unless we deconstruct our construction.
I'm with you on that. I think the process is the right one. It's just about, we can quibble about where we think we are on the spectrum of progress, but the process is the right one. I'm just saying there's something about this that seems artificial, that's being made too much of. That's why I think there's been pushback against it. But is there politics at play? Yeah. Politics at play? 100%. Everything is. Look at Russiagate, look at Epstein, all of it. Look at Dusty, she's yelling in my ear. Nina Turner, Scottie Nell Hughes, thank you both and each. Have a good weekend. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. It's all a distraction. And yet it is where we are, right? Sydney Sweeney doesn't matter. Why'd I waste TV time on it? Because it's all over social media. It's becoming part of a processing mechanism. All right, so let's have it both ways on this show. What do you say? It's a Friday night. So I'll do what everybody tells me I have to do. But here's something that nobody else is doing. Human trafficking is a talking point in this country to make a boogeyman out of people who enter the country illegally. But it's also a real problem that is uniquely domestic. There was a bust today that you've probably heard almost nothing about. Over 70 people were arrested. Almost 30 victims were rescued. Now that's human trafficking. That's real. Who were they? How'd they catch them? What's next? Guess how many people get sold for sex in this country, if they're lucky, just sex? Every day. 15,000. That comes from the U.S. State Department, to the extent that you believe anything anymore. Today, here's something that you better believe. 72 people were arrested. 72. Think about that. 29 victims rescued from a massive human sex trafficking bust in Mississippi. Operation Guardian Force took 2 weeks, 400 federal, state, and local agencies working together. Talk about your tax dollars at work. More of this, please. Let's bring in former detective and former White House human trafficking czar, Bill Wolf. Bill, thank you very much for being with me tonight. And bravo on these men and women that got this done. You know, this is an issue that's a talking point, but nobody ever captures the reality. Where does this size up in your estimation?
Look, I mean, human trafficking is something that's happening all across the country every day, as you mentioned in the beginning. We got to give our credit to the Attorney General, who really focused in on this effort. Back in my investigative days, this was something that we would try to plan these these operations, and they're really complicated to get this many law enforcement agencies together, to get victim services, to be able to conduct the actual investigations themselves. So well done to Mississippi and the Attorney General's office.
So 72 people, what are we looking at here? Is this like what you think is prostitution that now we just call human trafficking, or is there more to it that we have to understand?
Yeah, so prostitution obviously is what we have historically called commercial sex. We talk about human trafficking, sex trafficking in particular. We're talking about where it's forced or people are coerced or defrauded into this, or even worse, and we saw in this case where at least one juvenile, one child was involved in this type of conduct. And so it's growing at an exponential rate. You mentioned it earlier on the show. We're seeing where the internet is becoming a problem. We're seeing where these traffickers, the offenders, are just getting access to younger and younger people and exploiting them for sex.
So I was looking to see if the missing persons registries were going to be somehow implicated in this. And I talked to somebody today and she said no. Unfortunately, a lot of the people, unless they're really young, who get caught up in this are people that people decided to just give up on, or they lie about what's going on because they've been told if they don't lie about it, they're dead. Is that true? And how do they get help now that they've been rescued?
Yeah, in the United States, the average age that somebody first enters into the sex trafficking trade is about 16 years old. In cases a lot younger, I've worked cases as young as 9 years old that were being sold for sex. But the reality is that oftentimes you're right. These young people are written off by the system. They're said, they're juvenile delinquents, they're non-responsive to services. And so we don't invest the time or the effort. We've really got to do better about shifting the narrative around this. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned in the beginning, this is a domestic problem. Right? This is something that's happening here in the United States. It's happening in our communities. It has the ability to impact every neighborhood across our country right now. Yes, those that are coming across the border are particularly vulnerable to trafficking, but it's also U.S. kids and young adults that are being targeted as well.
Yeah, and very often lower on the socioeconomic ladder. White, yes. But the racial diversity of it, let's call it, is almost the most closest thing to parity we have in this society, which is proof of why it doesn't get as much attention as well. If it were all beautiful young white kids from suburban neighborhoods, it'd probably be more of an urgency. Mr. Wolf, we take the problem where we find it, and today is a win, baby, because this is a big bust. Thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll be able to do this again and soon.
Yes.
4 minutes and 15 seconds. Bravo, man. Bravo. Government working. Getting the right bad guys. Getting the kinds of people we should be afraid of. Good, good, good. Now, here's another one. Have you ever heard of passing the trash? This is a concept that I first learned about in the priest scandal, where bad priests get shuffled around. And I thought that was just the church hyper-forgiveness and trying to protect the institution. Turns out it happens with teachers, too. Did you hear about that? It is an unspoken element of this teacher who was just arrested for murder. The teacher killed a couple that was out hiking with their kids. It's being dubbed the Devil's Den murders. But there's something more to this than this psycho-looking guy with the hair on the screen. Pass the trash. Was this something that should have been stopped well in advance? Next. If you push past the horror of the Devil's Den murders allegations that this poor family was slaughtered, there's something else beyond the Arkansas couple, beyond their kids. This elementary school teacher who did it, okay? Andrew James McGann. Whenever you kill people, you get 3 names. He was a teacher at an elementary school in Texas. Was he a known problem in that school and before and allowed to move instead of being exposed, like what we saw during the priest abuse scandal? Seems the answer is yes. Former CIA and FBI agent Tracy Walder joins me. Why her? Because I told you, this woman seems to have a connection, personally or investigatively, to everything I cover. Tracy, thank you for being with me. Thank you for sharing your experience once again. How do you know about this, and what do we need to know?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Chris. Aside from being CIA and FBI, I left the FBI to become a teacher. And my very first job actually was teaching in the same school district that Mr. McGann worked in. And what's really disturbing is this passing the trash. It's something I've been an advocate for about 5 years. And the reason I'm such an advocate is because I am former FBI, but it's happened to me. And it happened to my own daughter. And her teacher is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence for child pornography charges. And I called CPS on him not once, but 2 times. And this school did nothing about it. They were more concerned about preserving their reputation and preserving their optics to society than actually doing something about this teacher. And this is a trend that I am seeing across the United States, and it's wrong.
What's past the trash?
So basically, pass the trash is passing along teachers and allowing them to resign, which is exactly what happened to Mr. McGann, despite allegations of misconduct. And I understand that nothing was founded as a result of the sexual misconduct, but actually he was found to have poor classroom management skills and poor classroom judgment. Those are 2 things that as a teacher should follow you to your next job because they are directly engaged in your performance.
Right. I mean, look, it's easy to make the case against this guy. He's a psychopathic killer. Just look at him. The idea that he was ever seen fit for a classroom tells you on its face you got a problem. Tracy Walder, thank you once again for having profound insight into a news issue that we need to understand better. And I'm glad your daughter's in a better place. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
Amazing. We'll be right back. Quickie pro tip for media literacy. Why would they want this to be true? Ask yourself that with every story you read. You can even do it on tonight's show. Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.